Hi there. I'm your host, Cory McKane, and I want to welcome you to the In Fitness and in Health podcast, the best podcast out there for, well, everything fitness and health. We'll be interviewing all sides of the health and wellness world. Industry experts from celebrity personal trainers, all the way to some of the leaders of the biggest fitness tech companies on the planet. We're going to be diving deep into the corners of fitness to get a better understanding of the ins and outs of the body, the mind, and the business of fitness. This podcast is absolutely sponsored by WeStrive. WeStrive is the world's #1 platform for health and wellness professionals, including personal trainers, nutritionists, yoga instructors, and the like. Head to WeStriveApp.com and use promo code podcast50, that's podcast50, to get 50% off your first 2 months after your free trial. Now, let's get started with this week's podcast. So I'm actually glad to have you back on the show because I had you on my original podcast a long time ago. And since that podcast, I've actually ordered like literally everything from my pre-workouts to my protein powder, all from Labdoor. I honestly don't look anywhere else. Absolutely love it. And I tell everyone I know about it. So you guys are completely crushing it.
Awesome, man. Thanks.
Absolutely. Can you give the world like a quick intro just about yourself and what you guys do?
Yeah, so Labdoor tests vitamins, supplements. We're now at close to 40 categories, anything from protein powders, creatine, multivitamins, now all the way to the CBD gummies, the vapes, cartridges. We're kind of getting into any sort of category where there's real doubt in the quality and safety of the products that you're consuming. And so we're thinking about, we get asked about food, about cosmetics. There's kind of this whole range of products that you'd think about in a drugstore, but those are really the products that we're looking to get tested.
And is there a limit on how far you can go? Like, we're not going to test this dog food, or is that a possibility? Like, where's your limit for all that?
So actually, so dog food would actually be a great category because there are those same issues, right? A lot of people are worried about the protein content not being high enough quality, or they're lying about it, and there's way more grain or flour in there than there should be. And so I think the limit is products that have a safety or an efficacy claim in some way. Uh, so and we've done testing in the lab that can even go to like water bottles, and is it really BPA free? You know, things like wine or alcohol, right? There are sulfides in those products. Are the products as pure as they claim? Are the alcohol contents accurate? So I think it's really just a limit of kind of scaling the platform and getting it to the place where supplements is one business, and we're able to use certifications and affiliate revenue to monetize that, right? So it's now more of a automated business where we do the testing, we put the results up for free, right? And then we're able to get a recurring revenue based on the affiliates. But we have to be able to grow that platform, and that's really our next process.
And so, is it exactly that? Like, you literally go. I think I used C4 the last time we spoke, but I'll use it again just because I'm stupid. But we'll take C4 for example. So you test C4, you put it on your platform, and then you reach out to C4 distributors and say, "Hey, give us an affiliate code," or like, how does that process work?
So usually the affiliate codes can come from the major retailer. So we don't even have to work with the manufacturers at all. We'll just go and buy the product in store like anyone else does. Take the product into a lab. The safety testing is, we start with contaminants. So it's heavy metals first. Some other ingredients like fish oil can have specific, pesticide type contaminants, or mercury or other types of PCBs so that we could work on. And so we just look at those key contaminants, and then we look at the active ingredients. So same thing for a fish oil, we'd be looking at the EPA or the DHA. For a C4, we might be looking at the creatine and the caffeine content, and a bunch of other active ingredients, because some of those pre-workouts have a ton of active ingredients in them. And then we can basically put together our own profile of what the product is actually inside the product, not what's on the label, and use that data to really compare the products. We grade them on a 8 through F scale, a 0 to 100 scale. And so sometimes you can see, a few products are very, very close, or you can see products that have massive differences, and they're just all ranked there on the site.
And what I just realized too is that I actually currently at my house have a protein powder, a fish oil, and a pre workout, all that I bought from you guys. Oh, and I have a creatine little pill container thing too. So I just love it. It just makes everything so much more legitimate. There's not another website that does it ever. So since our interview, or does what you guys do, sorry. So since our interview, that's pretty much all I do is just use your website for this stuff. So what is one category that is the most, I guess, like surprisingly incredibly inaccurate?
So pre-workouts was the one that we actually went in expecting there to be a lot of issues. We actually have even tested for some products that had been previously dinged for having stimulants in them that were unlabeled. So that's actually we went and did extra testing on a category like that just on purpose so that we could do that. Uh, some of the categories that were unexpected, probiotics were one of that. There were a lot of probiotics that had almost 0 or 1% active ingredient in them. Basically, like if a probiotic goes bad, if it's not shelf stable, it doesn't lose like 5 or 10% of its active ingredient. Like the whole thing dies. Like the entire active culture dies. And so we were finding products that were just zero active ingredients, like right live active ingredient in the product. And so that was the one that was the most surprising for me.
With what you've said, like how long do these tests take when you're in the lab? So obviously you're not going to be testing for an eternity, but when you get something new into the lab, do you test some things for like a week and some for months, or like what is that process like?
So what we'll do testing on every year or two, basically we'll try to update these results. Protein's been updated, a few of these categories have been updated. The question is with shelf life is not, most supplements actually can last for years, right? So if you had your creatine in your house, it might have a 2 year expiration date, but it could easily last 4 or 5 plus years. There's nothing that's going bad or like kind of degrading in the product itself. There are specific products like the probiotics where every year like that, or even batch to batch, you're going to see some variations, and so those are the categories that need to be tested more frequently.
And what did you? I can't remember from last time. What did you study in school? Like, why are you so good at doing all this?
So I studied molecular biology and business at the University of Michigan. The reason why I'm good at testing is actually a family connection. So my dad ran testing labs my whole life, and so I had the idea of molecular biology and business together as a way to build labs and build testing labs. My thought had originally been to go more into the like biotech type space, like what kind of Moderna and like vaccines, and that was actually what I was studying to try to go into. It was kind of to be more in the biotech space, and just through the process of when I graduated, my dad's businesses were not doing very well, and so I just jumped in and helped him, right? And so by helping him rebuild his businesses, that was I got deep into the chemistry side, which is kind of seen as more of the like old school sciences, right? Like the chemistry biology work versus kind of like everyone wants to be in like biotech and pharma these days. And so I kind of went back into that chemistry testing and found that there was just like so much that wasn't being done, right? There's just all of these products that we consume every day and no one's testing them, right? And it's just like it is a matter of getting just building a lab, buying hundreds of products and running them through an assembly line and getting every single one tested. It's a process, but it's like someone's job and someone needs to do it. And so that's really how I kind of got into testing for the last 10 plus years. And now it's become a specialty, but also just a passion to make sure that everything is tested. Like we live right by Flint right now, right? So figuring out more water testing. What is there? Like, what are ways that we could improve water testing? Make sure that the more like those 10 times or 100 times more tests out there, right? All of those types of things uh, are just like they're still unsolved problems. They're just like this space, the lab science testing space, still has so many unsolved problems.
And I feel like, and I could be totally wrong, but I feel like it's unsolved because it doesn't like who's funding it. Am I wrong with that?
No, that's a big problem. You're right. It's I think that was an issue that we always had with Labdoor, right? Is like we have to pay for the testing ahead of time, right? And then expect the business to work, right? And so now that we have a lot of categories, we have momentum, and so some of that can build in. Is kind of like the same way someone would have an existing audience, right? And you would just keep talking to that existing audience. But the issue with that was then we had to, we did multiple rounds of angel and VC funding. That's not easy. That takes a lot of time. It can really push the business in different directions, right? So I think that's an unsolved problem, right? Meanwhile, the FDA spends $5 billion a year and does not do this testing, right? This testing is not even part of their job. And so, in some ways, there's just like massive amounts of money theoretically going into this exact space. And in some other way, they're not really using it effectively. And so, someone like Labdoor can spend, $1 million or $2 million a year and do this kind of massive amount of work. What we've got to figure out is, how do you scale that up? How is Labdoor doing 10 million or $100 million in testing? That's one kind of factor that we're always thinking about. And then that goes for, how does Consumer Reports get funded? How do, ProPublica gets funded? Like, a lot of these are nonprofits. A lot of these are these institutions. The New York Times bought Wirecutter. And so a lot of these companies have the potential to build these businesses, but they're challenging businesses. They're kind of this combination of, they're partially like media business or journalism. Like, it's almost like running the New York Times or something. It's hard, right? Like, people are constantly challenging you. You have to get better and better. Right? There's fact checkers and all these different things, but it's also, from a business side, very difficult, right? It's because it's hard to sell ads nowadays. It's hard to sell subscriptions nowadays, and so there's like all of these different things. Uh, if we could figure out a way to fund more of this testing, right, massive improvements could be made. And so it's either, way more funding, or the way I always think about it is, can we figure out a way to bring the testing costs down, right? Can we figure out, is there a way to decentralize the testing in some way? Is a way to improve the technology so that the testing gets cheaper itself? So those are really the boundaries of the problem that we're trying to solve.
And then you mentioned the VC and angel rounds, and I know, just because I've already interviewed you, that you guys got like your some pretty big investors, like one of them being Mark Cuban. And so, like, what were your pitches early on? Like, what were you like? Were you presenting what you literally have today, or was the vision back then not clear? Or like, where were you at back then when you raised that money?
So the vision on why we were doing it was always very clear. So it was like, these products need to be tested. This information needs to be clear. And that was, I actually had met Mark Cuban in February of 2012, about 3 months before I started Labdoor, and we had briefly had a conversation about this, which is, my last business was a testing lab that worked for manufacturers. So we solved the problems that manufacturers had. So if a product was failing, we would work with them to figure out why, and try to solve that problem, and then tell them. But it would be a private process where we solved their problems, they'd fix it, and no one would know. Versus, what I really wanted to do was, independently test, and then we could tell anyone if a product had failed. And so in this situation, I knew that we needed this information, that the data was going to be valuable. And what Cuban and I had talked about was this idea that, if there was a way to build an assembly line type process, basically automate or kind of scale rapidly how many products you could test, that data itself would be really valuable. And that was really the basis of it. Is like, this data is important for millions of consumers, therefore it'll be somehow would be an important business. And that's all we went out in the seed round with. And so we did that process. And then, so that was 2012, 2013. And so we built the site out. We got hundreds of products on the site. And then 2014, 2015, we went into Y Combinator. And that's really when they pushed us to figure out where the business was, and scale the business side of it. And so we really pushed ourselves initially to be a marketplace. And so in the kind of early 2015 period, it was, how do we take these reviews? Like, do these reviews have their most value? It's when you're buying a product, right? You're doing this research, you're trying to decide what to buy. And so, in that moment, can we connect people to the products that they want to buy? That would be the most efficient way to build this business. And so that's really, we scaled that 2015, 16, 17. And then, so our Series A was very based on the business that we had built, and why it could be self-sustainable. But seed round was totally done just based on the idea that this data would be important and just people needed it.
I mean, yeah, definitely raised because of you had like an incredible background. So like you obviously knew what you were talking about. I feel like if I tried to raise that kind of a funding round with that business, they'd be like, what are you doing?" You know. So
It's
obviously you
tough.
were.
It's tough either
Yeah.
way, right? I also
Oh
think
yeah,
that
for
there's people with more experience than I did, right? So I had just moved from Michigan to San Francisco in 2012. I didn't know anyone out there. Had never really met VCs. Had never like bumped into like there were no VCs in my like none of my family friends were
same.
VCs or
I
anything
didn't
like
know what
that.
a VC was until I moved to LA. Really. So
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. So it's like didn't know any of the concept, right? And so I was starting from scratch. And so from that process, I ran through just hundreds of pitches. And so I think if there's anything that's like in my investing story, if we have like 50 or 60 total investors right now. And part of that was just like by necessity, where like I pitched like 500 investors to get 50 small checks, like relatively small checks to put together around where sometimes, nowadays there's like single investor or 2-3 investor, $10 million seed rounds and stuff like that. So definitely struggled the way up to get some of that funding.
Yeah, I've been in the same boat, and I feel like my biggest checks came in this year. One investor funded 50K. Most of our checks have been like 10K, 15, 20, and so forth. So I'm still waiting to get that one big like $10 million check. So I totally feel you on that. Do you have a passion for like fitness, nutrition outside of Labdoor? Like outside of just chemistry and science and all that stuff? Like, do you play sports or where are you at with all that?
Yeah, so I do. So I use Labdoor for my supplements. So I have a big supplement routine too. I play hockey twice a week.
So I
Uh,
was gonna ask about the hockey stick. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm a big hockey player, and I do CrossFit a couple times a week too, trying to build up a little bulk for hockey because I'm on the smaller side in on the hockey side, so I'm trying to bulk up, trying to get a little stronger, and so that to me gets me that's my routine of just like basically just trying to be a better hockey player is my fitness goal and system, but yeah, a lot of supplements involved.
Yeah, goals are so important. I found out that just from personal experience that when I'm in the gym, I don't really have a plan. I feel like I have a half-ass workout every single time. Um, so I like being able to actually achieve something, and I think it's just so essential for not just your own workouts, but just like being in the fitness industry in general. Um, and actually, going back to a previous company that I wanted to talk about, I think we mentioned this in the last podcast, but your previous company was acquired for a lot of money. And can we kind of break that down again, like what that process was like getting acquired and then what that company was called?
So the company's called Avomeen. It was started in 2010, right out of college. And so we were in Ann Arbor, Michigan, testing business. Started that business with my dad, and so his past business had struggled through the recession. He'd got into a fight with the bank. The bank had taken the business, kind of like in a foreclosure type situation, and so he needed to do something new, right? And so like we needed to kind of rebuild the business, and so we went like 5 miles off Ann Arbor's campus, a place that was relatively cheap, got a few thousand square feet, and bought a bunch of secondhand equipment and started building. And so that business had grown pretty significantly. It was probably 15 or 20 people in 2012 by the time I started Labdoor. And so basically, I got really full time on Labdoor, and my dad took over Avomeen, and he really ran Avomeen from 2012 to 2016 when the company was acquired. He and I always really worked together. And so when that company got acquired, I think a lot of what was kind of exciting about those types of businesses is that they start getting uh, more and more automatic over time, right? I think one of the big challenges of those types of businesses, it reminds me of like a law firm or something like that, where at a small scale, it's a real hustle, right? Like every single client, you have to go out there and like no one knows who you are, and so you have to go and convince them why you're good. But then 5 or 10 years into a process like that, if you've built a name recognition, you've built a brand, you've gone online and people know who you are, then all of a sudden like business just like comes to you, right? People know who you are and you just get that acquire that business, and so that it became a business that was just very solid and it just kind of continued to run and do really well. And so it's been in other people's hands now for 5 plus years, and it's doing great. And so it's getting close to 100 people now. And so we cheer for it on the sidelines, but it's just it was a great process in one way, very different than Labdoor, which was, there's no outside funding. It was entirely that kind of that bootstrapped hustle. But then it turns into like that kind of SMB, that really strong small business. I wish that there was a better name for those than a small business, because those things are really powerful. Versus the Labdoor, which is kind of that boomer bust. You have to go out there and fundraise. There's no money at the beginning, no revenue at the beginning, and then trying to flip a business model on later. It's just a completely different system, and so it was fun to get both of those experiences.
Yeah, I mean, exact same boat with that here. It took me years to build up to where we're at. We're just now on the revenue side of things, so it's an exhausting process. So I totally feel you there. Speaking of revenues, 100% of your revenue comes from the percentage of sales through your website. But for example, I bought like 30 things from your website. Your revenue comes from all those sales, like through affiliate links, or how does that work?
So that was how we started, and now we have a second revenue stream where we've started to, for the best companies, they basically license a Labdoor certification that goes on their product. And so we do, and so for those people, we'll actually do additional testing. So we'll actually go in and do batch to batch testing. So it's not like every year. We'll make sure that we're guaranteeing to test them more frequently. And then if they've consistently passed all their purity and safety testings, they can add that. And that includes, now for CBD testing, we can also guarantee that a product has no THC, like a THC free certification. So people aren't failing drug tests. It's a big issue with athletes. We can certify for sport. So we can guarantee that there's no banned substances in the product. And so we've now started to get deeper and deeper into this certification process, where we can really precisely say, for kind of these specific use cases, say we guarantee that this product has no banned substances, or we guarantee it has no THC, to make sure that, right, like in a really high value case, that nothing bad happens.
And I feel like there's so many like branches you can go off and like measure or doing that stuff for like bodybuilding competitions or CrossFit or whatever. And like, I mean, I'm sure I don't know anything about blood testing, but I'm sure you guys could probably do the same thing. I mean, obviously you know more than me, but that's so cool you guys are doing that. So I'm trying to picture the product that I bought. I feel like it did have a little Labdoor certified thing on it. And I mean this with all due respect, and I use your product obviously. Are you guys big enough? And this is obviously a yes because you just said it is. Are you guys big enough that like the companies are coming to you and saying like, yeah, we want that Labdoor cert? You know, like is that where you guys are at now?
It's happening more and more every year, right? So this is
Okay.
now year 9, right? So yeah, so it is much more in year 9 than it was in year 4, right? We actually did have year 3 or 4. There were a few companies already that started coming to us and saying, they saw it themselves. They said, "Hey, like our sales went up. We didn't know how. We looked around the website, the web, and like your site kept coming up, or like Labdoor kept coming up in our customer reviews, right? Things like that. So like there were these really early signs where they said like, how can we work with you? Can we do something?" And so we had started doing that on these very like one-off basis. We'd start working with specific companies, but once we kind of year as we kind of got into the Series A, and we had a little bit more resources to do multiple things at the same time, that's when we got deeper into, how would the certification work? How could we do this testing at scale? And so that, I think, is something that now, like at 50 years, or it'll be better than the 10 years, right? And so I think for me, I always think about that brands like Labdoor tend to be, I compare it to like Consumer Reports, which is a 90-year-old company, right? New York Times or the Washington Post, which are 100-plus-year companies. There's kind of the Lindy effect. There's like this self-fulfilling prophecy a little bit about these companies, where like the longer they survive, the more trust they get, right? It's like the longer they fight, and the longer they're there, the longer you trust them. And so we have to build that, and like we'll hit a decade next year, right? And that's just starting that process of like, we've been here for a while, and we know what we're doing. And I think that's why I had that itch to start more businesses, and that's who I've always been. Same way I left, Avomeen to start Labdoor. And so we really thought about that process carefully, and we said we wanted, a long-term CEO, someone who's been there since day one, Raphael, to kind of to keep the process going, keep that running, and allow me to kind of think about what's next, and if there's kind of other categories and other things to invent. It'll probably still be in this space, but it's just it might be a new company, and that's something that I've been really excited about.
And just to clarify, because we talked about that before I hit record. So you actually stepped down as CEO, and your co-founder took the role. So you can what you just said basically, but I just want to clarify to the audience that's what happened. So congrats to you on being able to open up your schedule and work on other things that you're passionate about.
Yeah, it's exciting. So I get to do the fun kind of board member stuff. We've always had the board members are still the three founders from the very beginning, and the three of us work great together. And it's just to us that part that is a lot of where the like creation and strategy happens. Is just those like the three of us just not like no agenda, just sitting in a room. We're now sitting on a phone call and figuring it out, and so that part I love doing, and so now it's fun to actually kind of then see the execution happening, and I can check in once a week, and like great stuff is happening. So the team is doing an awesome job, and I think this kind of next level of how can we keep building on the certifications, building on the brand, and expanding it. Now it's starting to go a lot more international, so we're seeing India is a really popular country for our service.
Yeah, India is blowing up for weightlifting. It's crazy. Like all over Instagram, we have so many trainers that are joining from India. Like it's absolutely insane.
And so I think that's a huge thing. Is just and Brazil's the same way. Both my co-founders are Brazilian, but it's really kind of going globally where people are understanding what the brand means. I think in other countries the quality control issues are even worse than they are in the US,
Oh yeah,
right?
sure.
And so there's counterfeit issues, or so certifications. We've thought about that too. Globally, there are counterfeits, right? And so how do we can we use the certification to somehow block counterfeits? And so that's another factor that we've had. So those are all of these the places that we can expand to, and so I'm excited to see where that goes. And yeah, just supporting the team as much as I can.
And then with the certifications, I'm going to bring up C4 again just because it's a good example. So obviously not a high quality product. I take it sometimes because I just feel hyped up. Like obviously it's not the best or not the most high quality product, but as a company like Cellular or C4, whatever it's called, are they going to ask you for a certification? Or I guess I'll take a step back. Like, what does a certification mean? Does it mean that you've tested it, or does it mean that it's a high quality product?
So we're working to make the certifications a stricter standard of testing than our independent testing. So the independent testing is contaminants, active ingredients, right? And so it's this kind of it's a very set panel, which really tells you, 95, 99+% of what's in the product. But there is the risk of C4 like products, especially for the more strict you get into athletes, is if there's that like 0.1% of banned substance in there, that's really where they're going to get in trouble. And so that's really where the certifications are kind of looking for these really specific things. And so it's possible that C4 could be completely clean from a sports perspective, and so they might still want to do that certification and be certified for sport to say, hey, there's guaranteed no banned substances in here. It might not have the best active ingredient profile compared to the other products or not. We don't know. Maybe it does. We'd have to test it. But I think that the issue would be we can always kind of find in some of these cases that if a product is THC free and it's a CBD product, it might not have the highest concentration of CBD, right? But it has no THC guaranteed, and that might be important for a certain customer, right? And so I think we're starting to try to figure out this is now the dream has always been for Labdoor to get as personalized on the testing as possible, right? It's like every could we test every allergen? We've tried to figure that out. Could we, like it starts getting more and more precise. So specific people need specific data, and that could be companies, that could be people, that could be people with a specific allergy or specific illness. But it could be people taking it if there's kids taking the product, right? That's a major factor these days of making sure that specific ingredients are out of the product. And so those are all the places where we're trying to push the science and push the certifications, to also just to teach people that, hey, look for that certification, look for the Labdoor certification when you buy something if this is important to you.
I mean, I tell everyone. So I'm one of you guys' biggest advocates out here. I'm saying it for the fourth time. I just love how there's rankings. It makes it so simple. I can just go on there and just like boom, bought it, done, good to go. I know it's a high quality product. Uh, and so with, well, one more time, Cellular and their website and Amazon, for example, is there one of those two that gives you a higher commission, like through the direct website or through Amazon? And then I'm also going to assume it's not Amazon.
So we're now starting to work with the companies directly. So we started 2015. It was all Amazon links, and Amazon used to be 8-9% affiliate rates, right? Now it's like 1 to 2%, right? It's really crazily dropped off in the last 8 years, 5 to 6 years. So that's a big issue, right? So over time we've started saying, let's just link directly to the companies. And so as we start reaching out to these companies, My Protein's a classic example. They've really built out a huge e-commerce presence on their own, and so our links can just go directly to My Protein's website. We can even kind of figure out ways to do. We're trying to figure out ways to like pull discounts through and different things like that too. And so if we can get you like directly to like direct to the source, they have a better price. A lot of these companies are starting to do that. They're starting to list higher on Amazon and list the lowest possible price on their direct website to get customers to buy direct. And so if we can get you more directly to the source, we'll do that. And so that's another part of the, build out the platform, build out the system. It's just a long process of going company to company and getting some of those systems working.
And just out of curiosity, do you analyze if there's a higher buy rate? Because I just feel like, me personally, I feel like the normal consumer is just way more comfortable with Amazon and that point of sale. And then when you go to another company, it's totally different. You have to make a new account. So like, what is that? What is that like conversion rate like?
I think so. The Amazon conversion rates are always great. I think I think it's either the comfort with Amazon itself, right? It's just like everything's it's the shipping, it's the credit cards are already saved. There's a lot of inertia in that. So I think from that perspective it goes really quickly versus like if I send you to some supplement company's website that you've never bought from before and you have to put in your shipping and billing information, all that stuff. I think that's one issue. I think we're seeing Shopify websites, so like websites that are Shopify integrated are easier, right? There's sometimes it can like figure that out and kind of bypass that process. Some of those things are helping. That's a major. If someone can figure that out, and we're looking into ways to do that too. If we can kind of build affiliate tools into our own website and also start to take some of that middleman out, we're trying to figure that out as much as possible. But I think there's a lot of value in getting Amazon out of the process and get connecting customers directly to the companies. And Labdoor is trying to do that, right? Is if because I think the biggest pivot point is Labdoor in some of those cases. It's like Labdoor is changing which product you're going to buy, and then it's kind of then you decide which store to buy. And I think a lot of people are choosing Amazon. And so the question is that second step, the step after Labdoor, right? Can companies convince customers that they should buy direct, and what advantages can they use that for? So I'm very curious about that, but that's something that the industry definitely needs to work on.
Yeah, I'm curious. I figured it's a good answer. And just from my experience, I bought privately from you guys through the website, and I also bought through Amazon. And then I obviously, with Amazon, I can just go boom, boom, boom and get it. With the other websites, you have to make an account. It's a little bit more of a process. So I do like supporting your business more. But if I'm in a big hurry, I have to kind of go through Amazon. So kind of, changes things. Um, and about a little over a year ago, you started another company, and I believe it's called All to All. And can you just break down what you guys do and like why you created this company?
Yeah, so it's Airdoll, and Airdoll is it's yeah, no worries. Yeah, it's a nonprofit. So we started March last year. It is for so we had the idea about putting a group of smart people together and try to invent low cost medical devices. And so we've gone through the entire process of we could put together these really cool teams from around the world that started working on ventilators and respirators. And so there's two models of ventilators. A Model A that's really simple and cheap, it could be under $1,000 per ventilator versus these like $50,000 ventilators. And then a Model B ventilator that could be in the $1 to $3,000 range. And so thinking through what that looks like, and then also a respirator, a powered air purifying respirator, a PAPR, that is basically for if you look at like healthcare professionals or like like doctors who have these like these full like hoods on when they are going into COVID conditions. There's basically like a hood and like a hose that's attached to this air purifier that sits on your waist. These things are like thousands of dollars usually, and they're really hard to get these days because of COVID. And so we were trying to design a system that was under $500. And so we've got this a working PAPR that we've kind of fully tested, and we want to get out to NIOSH. We've done all the work to get a 501(c)(3) certification. So we're going to be a full nonprofit. We're already a California nonprofit, and so we've built all these structures to basically uh, to build cheap medical devices for these kinds of issues. The tough part was it was kind of this 1 year sprint. So many challenges. One, like supply chain was a mess this year. Even like
Oh
this would normally be a challenge, but it was especially a challenge this year. And just like building all that remotely was really, really difficult. But I think now that we've gotten to a place where, we're going to have the nonprofit status, we're going to have these products developed. I want to make sure that this is something that exists. Like the idea of nonprofit medical devices is just something that I believe should exist. And so, as much as possible, this will be one more thing that I think we'll try to recruit as we kind of get the nonprofit status solidified. Try to recruit a more long term team as well here, right? And have people who are kind of actually working for the nonprofit day to day and making sure that these products exist. And because there's a lot of these places where we found that so much in Asia, Africa, South America, where the there were there were decades long shortages of medical devices. This was like not a 2020 problem. There was just people had never had medical devices, and there was never a ventilator in that hospital, right? Like there was never a ventilator in that state, like right, like someone would have to get like sent internationally to be on a ventilator in some of these countries. And so we just need to do this work. And so this is one more of my, I think in my passions, that I have this idea of the world's biggest problems. It's something this list I've been building on my website. I've just been like, what are the world's biggest problems and how can we solve them? And so I think this idea, nonprofit medical devices, was just like always on my list. It's just like something that needed to happen, and trying to tackle it this year. Same way that independent testing has always been on my list, right? And I think that like Labdoor has really challenged that for many years. And so I think we've made some major progress in Erdal in 1 year on the idea of nonprofit medical devices. And so excited to see what'll happen there. But it's for me that's much earlier along in the process. It's like much more uh, getting that to where we're kind of shipping devices all over the world. That's really a few years away, but I'm really excited about it.
That's so cool, man. I'm not gonna say I'm proud of you, but I'm like so pumped for what you guys are doing over there. Air to All is a much better company name. All to All, I messed that one up, obviously, but we'll figure that out later. And so you sit on the board of all these companies. You run like 14 of them. So how do you divide your time each day?
So I'm trying to actually set that up in a more concrete way. My idea is to build something like a startup studio around myself. And so a few other people have done it. There's maybe I think 60 or so in the U.S. right now of these kind of companies that build other companies. And so I'd like to do that. I'm kind of in the early stage of that process right now. So ideally that'll help me kind of build some infrastructure so I can start working on some of these projects. But the other part of it is just I use my calendar is segmented for the last kind of few months. Wednesdays have been aired all days. I've used Mondays for Labdoor, and then I've kind of used the other days to build new things. So I get that regimented. Sometimes it's just specific meetings or specific times I can just block off for different projects. But that is, you were talking about kind of physical performance or kind of getting as optimized as possible physically. As I get to, I'm 33 now. I've got two kids, right? And I feel like more of that like veteran in a athletic competition, right? Where it's just like now it's all about optimizing all the little details of like how do I make sure like everything like sleep is right? How to make sure like my office conditions are right? Like when I'm focused. Like I have a separate like desk to do different work. Like I have two different desks. I have a standing desk that I do different work on, right? And it's just like every little detail of it uh, to try to optimize that performance is just that's what I want to do. Like I want to be on all the time, and I want to be trying to do all these things. It's way more exciting to me than doing one thing all the time. And so I do whatever I can to try to optimize it so I can actually do that.
Dude, I'm the exact same way. I mean, that's why I have a podcast for WeStrive, and we're building videos for our exercise library. I just can't be like fitness app. Like I can't be one thing I do, and like I'm working on organizing a tournament, and I'm like doing so many things at once. So I just can't be doing the same thing every single day. So I'm the exact same way. And I mean, I have like multiple spots where I work, like my standing desk at home. I'm here in the office right now. Go to a coffee shop, so my brain's not built to do the same thing every day by any means, and I would go absolutely crazy if it was. So, and I feel like you kind of put the same energy into Labdoor. Like you're not just going to test one product; you're testing all the products. So, you guys just testing the whole gambit of the health and wellness world, and I love that. So, um, honestly, this has been an incredible podcast so far, and I'm just so happy to have you back on. I'm going to obviously keep ordering through Labdoor, so there we go. Do you have anything you want to leave our listeners with, like maybe your favorite supplements right now, or something that you've learned through all of your company journeys?
Yeah. So just in terms of the supplements right now in Labdoor that I think have been extremely popular. So I think with COVID, especially, vitamin D has been a major factor. We've seen some really great studies, and the dosages can be. I've seen dosages as high as 10,000 IU a day that are actually clinically safe and effective. And so if there is kind of one supplement that you should be taking during COVID, it's that. So check that out on Labdoor for sure. And I think if you want to send at Labdoor, if there's a product that's not on Labdoor, send us a message. Any social media, it's at Labdoor, and let us know what you want us to test. It doesn't have to be supplements. Like anything that you want to see tested, let us know. That big list really helps us. And so if there's a new category